Can you believe that one phone could change your entire life? What if you could feel a relationship falling apart with just one simple action? When this man asked for a family photo to prepare for a meeting, he never expected it to unveil a horrifying secret his wife had been hiding. The feeling of betrayal, the growing suspicion. Could he endure it all? Stay tuned to see what unfolds next in this shocking story. Before continuing the story, tell me which city you are watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. I just wrapped up a demanding workday and was putting together a presentation for a big client meeting. In my line of work as a financial analyst, visuals were everything, and nothing drove home reliability like family photos in a personal segment I had planned. It was a small touch, but a powerful one, and I wanted to use one of the older family pictures from back when they were still little. The best collection of these photos I knew was on Sarah's phone. I reached over to grab her phone off the counter and opened it, only to be met with a Face ID not recognized message. That was odd. I'd used her phone plenty of times before. I assumed it was a glitch, so I tried it again. The message popped up again and my gut twisted slightly. I'd been locked out. I glanced over at Sarah, who was in the kitchen cleaning up. "Hey, did you change your Face ID settings?" She paused, but her hands kept scrubbing a little too long over the same plate. "Oh yeah, it was just, for security. The phone was acting up lately, so I thought resetting it would help." Now, I'm not a paranoid man by nature, but we'd been married 15 years, and I knew Sarah well enough to recognize when she was skirting the truth. Her voice had that tightness, the same one she got when she was dodging questions about why she was working late more frequently these days. I shrugged it off, though, not wanting to overthink things. "Well, I just needed an old family photo for the presentation tomorrow. Can you unlock it for me?" She glanced at me, hesitating longer than seemed necessary. "Why don't I just find it for you?" she replied a little too quickly, brushing her hair behind her ear as she darted into another room with her phone. I stood there baffled. That small flicker of suspicion began to flare in my mind, despite myself. When she returned, she handed me her phone with the photo already pulled up. "Here you go," she said, her tone overly bright. I took the phone and quickly sent the photo to myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Sarah was defensive, agitated, and most of all, secretive. We really appreciate you liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Your support is a great inspiration and encouragement for us. Thank you so much. That was the part that lingered in my mind. We'd built a life together based on openness, or so I thought, and now a simple request for a family photo had turned into a circus of excuses. As the evening wore on, I couldn't let it go. I replayed the incident in my mind, searching for clues, for anything that could justify her behavior. When I finally climbed into bed, Sarah was already lying with her back turned to me, scrolling on her phone. I couldn't help but ask, "Sarah, why did you really change the password and delete my Face ID?" She paused but didn't turn to look at me. "I told you, James, it was a security thing." "Come on," I pressed. "We've never had secrets before. So what's different now?" She whipped around, her face twisted with annoyance. "Not everything has to mean something, okay? You're being ridiculous." But it was her anger that really sent up the red flags. She'd never reacted like this over such a simple question. And suddenly, I was wide awake, wondering what she was hiding. That night, sleep didn't come easily, and when it did, it was filled with fragmented dreams of Sarah's closed-off expressions and locked phones. And as dawn broke, I was left with the realization that something about our marriage was fundamentally changing. And it wasn't just my imagination. The following days felt like a strange dance, one in which I was trying to play the unsuspecting husband while my mind churned with suspicions I couldn't shake. Sarah's shift in behavior didn't stop with the password on her phone. I noticed her getting more elusive, always taking her calls in another room, and her phone never left her side. It felt like I was living with a stranger, someone who had something to hide and was growing increasingly careful to keep me in the dark. It was during one of her late meetings that my resolve snapped. I could no longer ignore the alarm bells ringing in my mind. Something had changed, and I needed to know why. As Sarah gathered her things to leave that evening, I pretended to settle into my routine, giving her a quick kiss goodbye and wishing her a productive meeting. But as soon as I heard her car pull out of the driveway, I sprang into action. I grabbed my own phone and opened the app that tracked her location, a feature we'd set up years ago for emergencies or convenience, back when trust was never in question. The app showed her at a hotel across town, nowhere near her office. That was the first dagger of betrayal. My heart pounded in my chest as I felt my world start to unravel. But I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe there was another explanation. Maybe she was meeting a client. I told myself anything to keep the pieces of my sanity together. An hour went by, then two. She was still there. Finally, when I could bear it no longer, I took matters into my own hands and drove to the hotel, parking in a dark corner of the lot. After several tense minutes of waiting, I saw her emerge from the hotel lobby, her arm linked with a man I'd never seen before. A man who was definitely not her client. He was tall, dark-haired, and charming in that painfully obvious way. Watching them, I felt a sharp, sickening pang in my chest. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. She leaned into him, laughing in a way I hadn't seen her do in years, like she was young and carefree again. It was a laugh that was meant for me but had somehow slipped away, taken by the stranger. I drove home in silence, my mind numb with disbelief. I stumbled through the front door and sat down, feeling as if the floor had opened up beneath me. What had we become? How long had she been lying? The next few hours felt like a blur. I went through every memory we'd made, every promise we'd exchanged, trying to figure out where things had gone wrong. Yet, even as I reeled in shock, there was another darker part of me that was ready for war. That night, I began gathering my own arsenal. I needed more proof, evidence that could make her face what she'd done, and so I would have a reason not to give her the courtesy of a clean break. I wanted her to feel every ounce of betrayal, to know that the life she was about to lose had been worth something. With that thought, I devised a plan. The next day, I took a personal day from work and made my way to the phone store. I had enough tech savvy to know there were options to clone a device. After a lengthy discussion with the tech guy, I was able to set up a way to receive her texts, emails, and photos on a secondary phone I would keep hidden. I felt a mix of shame and vindication as I left the store. This wasn't me. I wasn't the spying type, but I couldn't bear the idea of her lies festering in the background. Over the next week, the truth came pouring in like acid, eating away at every last trace of the love I thought we'd shared. The messages weren't just friendly exchanges. They were brazen confessions of her desire, conversations laced with secrets she was sharing with him instead of me. She told him things she'd never told me, intimate details, dreams, and wishes that once belonged to us alone. I read her words and felt as though I was watching her burn down our entire history. Photos came through too, pictures of her with him, pictures taken on nights she'd claimed to be working. I saw the small, hidden parts of her life that she'd carefully concealed from me. There was no question anymore. Sarah had chosen this new life, this other man, and she'd done it all while keeping me in the shadows. But the most painful revelation wasn't what she'd done with him, it was what she'd kept from me. She had rewritten our past together in those messages, calling our marriage stifling and claiming she had been trapped. My heart ached as I realized that her betrayal went deeper than infidelity. She had rewritten me, us, everything we had been to justify her actions. I spent sleepless nights turning these thoughts over, wondering how much of our marriage had been real. And then one night, a thought settled into my mind, cold and calculating. If she had changed the terms of our relationship without my knowing, then I would change the ending. If she thought she could destroy me and walk away untouched, she was wrong. So I planned. I didn't confront her outright. Instead, I started gathering everything I would need for my exit. I began liquidating my shares in our business, turning assets into cash that I could hide from her. I prepared paperwork for a divorce using an old friend's recommendation for a cutthroat lawyer who would make sure Sarah got as little as possible. I spent hours moving money, shifting finances, and laying the groundwork for a new life. If she wanted a fresh start, she was going to get it, but not in the way she expected. I knew that by vanishing from her life without a trace, without closure, I'd leave a scar that no amount of new love or excitement could cover. The thought of her losing everything she'd taken for granted, that she'd wake up one day to a life without me, without the comfort and security I'd provided, was the only solace I found in those long, dark days. Please pause for 2 seconds. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support is a great inspiration and encouragement for us. Thank you very much. By the time my preparations were complete, I felt a strange calmness wash over me. The man she had loved and betrayed was gone, replaced by someone sharper, colder. I would leave her not only with nothing, but with the knowledge that she'd destroyed the only man who had truly loved her. The day I decided to confront Sarah began like any other. She was in the kitchen, flipping through a magazine, sipping her coffee like it was a regular Saturday morning. But nothing about this morning would be routine. I had spent weeks preparing myself for this, building up the strength to face her with the evidence. I had all the proof I needed, saved on flash drive tucked into my pocket, ready to reveal the ugly truth that had festered beneath the surface of our marriage. As I walked into the kitchen, Sarah barely glanced up. "You're up early for a weekend," she said, her voice calm and detached. I watched her for a moment, the woman I'd once loved more than life itself. Her face looked serene, blissfully unaware of the storm about to hit. I almost felt a pang of sympathy, but only for a moment. "Sarah," I began, my voice as steady as I could manage. "We need to talk." She looked up, her expression shifting from mild curiosity to concern. "What's wrong?" she asked, her tone laced with feigned innocence. I placed my phone on the table and tapped the screen, opening up one of the many incriminating conversations she'd shared with her lover. "Explain this," I said, forcing myself to keep my tone level, though my pulse was racing with barely contained anger. Her face paled as her eyes darted down to the phone. For a brief second, I saw panic flash across her features, but then she tried to mask it, forcing a scoff and crossing her arms. "You've been spying on me? Unbelievable," she snapped, choosing anger over guilt. "What kind of husband snoops through his wife's messages?" I clenched my jaw, refusing to be drawn into her attempts to deflect. "The kind of husband whose wife has been lying to him for months," I replied coldly. "You think I wanted to see this?" I would have done anything to avoid it, Sarah, but I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. She rolled her eyes, her defiance only fueling my anger. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. It's harmless," she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "Just some innocent flirting." "Innocent?" I scoffed, my voice rising despite myself. "Meeting in hotel rooms, making plans behind my back, calling our marriage a trap. That's not innocent, Sarah. That's betrayal." For a moment, her shoulders slumped, the fight draining from her. I thought maybe, just maybe, she would apologize, that we could salvage something from the wreckage. But then, as if on cue, she straightened and glared at me. "You know what, James?" she spat, her eyes cold. "Maybe I was trapped. Maybe I got tired of being married to someone who was never around. You were always so busy with work, always so focused on everyone else. And yes, I found someone who made me feel alive again." "So what?" Her words struck like a slap to the face. I'd poured my heart and soul into our life, working endless hours to provide for her and the twins. The sacrifices I'd made, the nights I'd stayed late to make sure we had the kind of life she'd wanted. They meant nothing to her. I took a deep breath, my voice barely above a whisper. "Then you don't get to keep any of it." She blinked, momentarily confused. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about divorce," I said, my words deliberate, final. "I've already started the paperwork." "You're going to get exactly what you deserve, Sarah. And let me make one thing clear. You won't be taking me or any part of this life with you. You made your choice, and now you'll face the consequences." For the first time, fear crossed her face. "You can't just take everything. What about the house? What about the kids?" The mention of our children hit me hard, but I steeled myself. "The twins deserve a stable home, and I'm going to make sure they have one. I've been in contact with a lawyer, and I've already prepared everything. The house, the finances, you'll be getting less than you think." Her face twisted with rage, her hands clenched into fists. "You can't do this to me. I built this life with you. It gave you your writing." "Your writing," I repeated, laughing bitterly. "What you gave me was betrayal, Sarah. I gave you my trust, my loyalty. You threw it away for someone who, let's face it, probably won't stick around when he realizes you've lost everything." She glared at me, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to find words. but no defense came. She knew as well as I did that she was in the wrong. But rather than show remorse, she resorted to anger and accusations, deflecting her guilt onto me as though her choices were somehow my fault. "Fine," she spat. "If you want a divorce, then I'll fight you for every penny. You won't just walk away from this unscathed, Mark." I smiled, a calmness settling over me. "Do what you have to do, but remember you're the one who destroyed this. I'm just finishing what you started." I turned and left her standing in the kitchen, her face twisted with fury and disbelief. That image of her, defiant and enraged, would stick with me for a long time, reminding me of the woman she had become. She was no longer the woman I had loved. She was a stranger, someone who would rather tear me down than admit her faults. Over the next few weeks, things escalated quickly. Sarah fought hard, challenging every legal maneuver I made, but my lawyer was prepared. I had taken every precaution to protect myself, and every time she tried to fight back, she only dug herself deeper. She found herself scrambling to hold on to the life she had taken for granted. But with every court appearance, every financial examination, her options dwindled. The judge saw through her lies, through her attempts to paint herself as the victim, and my case only grew stronger. It was a grueling process, and yet each small victory brought me a sense of closure. I could see the fear creeping into Sarah's eyes as she realized the life she'd known was slipping away, that she had miscalculated in every possible way. When the divorce was finalized, she was left with barely enough to cover her debts. The house was mine, and her lover predictably had disappeared the moment her stability was threatened. The irony was almost too perfect. She'd sacrificed her marriage, her family, and her dignity, all for the fleeting thrill of an affair. Now she was alone, scrambling to piece together a life that had unraveled because of her choices. And as for me, I was finally free. The anger that had once fueled me had turned into a quiet satisfaction, knowing she'd been left to face the wreckage she'd created. And just like that, I vanished from her life, without a trace, leaving her to wonder about the man who had once loved her but had been pushed beyond forgiveness. After the divorce was finalized, I knew what I had to do. Sarah had left me broken, humiliated, and betrayed. But in her desperation, she had also given me something I hadn't realized I wanted until now: freedom. With the legal proceedings behind me, I was free to disappear and start fresh, far from the reminders of her betrayal. In the months following the court's decision, I quietly set things in motion. I sold the house, a place filled with memories I no longer wanted haunting me. I made sure to liquidate any remaining assets, carefully funneling the money into accounts that would be difficult to trace. I worked with my lawyer and financial advisor to ensure that Sarah couldn't follow the trail. To her, I would simply cease to exist. For my family and friends, however, the story was different. I told everyone I needed a fresh start, something to help me move on. A few friends urged me to stay, but they respected my decision and in their own ways understood. I took only what I needed: bare essentials, a few cherished possessions, and most importantly, my freedom. The plan was simple: move to a new city, adopt a new life, and erase every connection to Sarah and the life we had shared. Then, on a cold autumn morning, I left. I'd spent one last evening in the city, visiting my favorite spots, saying silent goodbyes to the memories and places that had once meant something to me. As dawn broke, I climbed into my car, knowing that when I drove away, I would never return. The first few months were hard. I moved to a small town across the country, rented a modest apartment, and started working at a consulting firm. The people there knew me only as James Evans, and no one asked questions. I kept to myself, pouring my energy into my work, finding solace in the routine. I built a new life, one that was deliberately quieter and simpler, a life that Sarah could never touch. As time passed, I kept my distance from anyone who might know my story. Sarah had tried to reach out a few times, likely realizing that her stable life had vanished alongside me. Her emails went unanswered. Her calls, which trickled in occasionally, went straight to voicemail. I blocked her number and closed the door on every digital avenue she might use to find me. If she wanted closure, she wouldn't find it here. Some nights I thought about the twins, our two sons, Daniel and Samuel, who had been swept up in the chaos of their mother's lies. I wondered how much they knew, how much she had told them, and whether they had believed the stories she'd likely spun. The thought of leaving them hurt more than anything else. But I knew that if I stayed, I would be dragged down by her deceit, her manipulations. In my mind, I consoled myself that one day they'd understand. Years turned into decades, and gradually my past life faded into a distant memory. I no longer felt the sting of betrayal when I thought of Sarah, nor the ache of loss when I thought of my boys. I convinced myself that moving on was the only choice I'd had. Life took on a steady rhythm, and I grew comfortable in the anonymity I'd created. I made friends in my new town, people who knew nothing of the man I'd once been, the family I'd left behind, or the wife who had betrayed me. It felt freeing in a strange way to be James Evans, a man without baggage, without regrets. I settled into this life, eventually finding love again with a kind, understanding woman named Sophia. She became my confidant, my rock, though I never shared the full truth about my past with her. Couldn't. Not yet. Not until I had truly buried that part of myself. 18 years went by this way. 18 years without a word from my former family. The life I'd left behind became a shadow, something I rarely thought about, until one day when everything changed with a single unexpected message. I remember that day vividly. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. Sophia and I were reading in the living room when I heard my phone buzz. First I ignored it, but something made me check. When I opened the message, my heart stopped. The message was from Daniel, my son. He was a grown man now, likely in his 20s, and seeing his name pop up on my phone felt surreal. My hands shook as I read his words. "Dad, I know this is out of the blue, but I need to see you. There's something you need to know about Mom. I think it's time you learn the truth." The words hung there, sharp and startling. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to shove the phone back into my pocket and pretend I hadn't seen it. But the other part, the part that had always longed for answers, for some kind of reconciliation, couldn't resist. After all these years, I'd assumed my boys would have forgotten me, or worse, hated me for abandoning them. But here was Daniel, reaching out, asking to meet, and hinting at something I hadn't known. What could he mean? The truth? I thought I knew everything. I thought the betrayal was clear. I showed Sophia the message, and she urged me to go, to find the closure that had eluded me for so long. With her support, I replied, agreeing to meet Daniel. He chose a small diner in a neighboring town, a place I could reach in an hour's drive. And so on a chilly Friday evening, I set out to face the past I'd tried so hard to bury. The drive was filled with an unease I hadn't felt in years. As I pulled into the diner's parking lot, I spotted Daniel right away, sitting at a corner booth, his face tense and serious. I could barely recognize him. He was no longer the young boy I'd left behind, but a man, a mirror of myself and my youth. His presence tugged at my heart, awakening the dormant father in me, the one who had yearned for a connection all these years. I slid into the booth across from him, unsure what to say, how to bridge a gap that had stretched nearly 2 decades. We exchanged awkward greetings, and after a moment, Daniel took a deep breath, staring at the coffee cup in front of him. "Dad," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I know you left us, and for a long time I didn't understand why, but now I think I finally do. There's something about Mom I need to tell you, something that should have come out years ago." He paused, gathering his thoughts, while I sat in silence, bracing myself. I thought I was prepared for anything, but whatever Daniel had to say felt like it would change everything I'd believed for years. Sitting across from Daniel in that diner, I could barely recognize the boy I had left behind. The once lively kid I remembered was now a serious, intense young man, bearing the weight of years I hadn't shared. The look in his eyes was a strange blend of pain and determination, and I braced myself for whatever revelation he had come to share. After a few moments of awkward silence, Daniel looked at me, his expression raw with a mixture of emotions. "Dad," he began slowly, his voice heavy, "there's so much I didn't understand when you left. For years we felt abandoned. We thought you didn't want us." Hearing those words was like a punch to the gut. The idea that my sons believed I had simply given up on them haunted me for years. Yet I had always assumed Sarah would tell them the truth. But Daniel's words told me otherwise. "What did your mom tell you?" I asked quietly, not sure if I wanted to know the answer. "She told us you didn't love us anymore," he said, voice shaking slightly. "She said you had run off, that you didn't care about us, and we believed her. But as we grew older, things didn't add up. Samuel and I eventually found out about the affair. She couldn't hide it forever. I gripped my coffee cup tightly, anger simmering beneath my shock. So Sarah had not only betrayed me, but had twisted the truth to justify her lies to our children. She had kept them from me, poisoned their memories, all while hiding her own betrayal. We pieced it together, Daniel continued, and we realized that you leaving had been more about her than about us. But by then, you were gone. I'm so sorry, Daniel, I whispered, barely able to hold back the surge of emotions. I never wanted to leave you or Samuel. I thought that staying would have caused more harm than good, that you'd be better off without knowing the truth. A sadness flickered in his eyes. I get it now, Dad. We both do. That's why I needed to find you, to tell you we understand. The relief was indescribable. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I felt as though I could breathe again. We sat there in silence for a few moments, letting the truth sink in and wash over the years of hurt. Your mother, I started, unsure of what to say. Daniel shook his head. She's paying the price, Dad. She lost us both a long time ago. Her lies cost her everything. The days following that meeting brought a whirlwind of change. Daniel and I began reconnecting, and soon after, Samuel joined us as well. They both shared the stories of growing up in a household where trust had been broken by secrets, and I finally understood how deeply Sarah's betrayal had scarred all of us. Yet through the pain, a bridge was forming. The twins, now men, had sought me out because they wanted to move forward, to build a future unclouded by the past. It was a gift I hadn't expected, a chance at redemption. Over the weeks that followed, we began piecing together a relationship. I shared stories from the years they'd missed, and they, in turn, opened up about their lives, their challenges, and their achievements. They had become strong, resilient men, despite the upheaval in their childhood, and I felt an immense pride in them. As for Sarah, her choices had left her isolated. Her lover had left long ago, and from what I learned through my sons, she was living alone, a shadow of the woman I had once known. Her own lies had turned back on her, and she had lost the family she had tried to control. Reconnecting with Daniel and Samuel gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. We agreed to take things slowly, to build new memories and allow trust to grow naturally. It would be a long road, but for the first time in nearly 2 decades, I felt hope. I had vanished to escape the hurt, but now I'd re-emerged, not as a broken man, but as a father determined to make things right. 18 years of pain were starting to heal, and in that journey, I had finally found peace. This man's story is a clear reminder of the power of truth, no matter how painful it might be. Sometimes life forces us to face the most uncomfortable and challenging situations, but it's through those very trials that we realize our own strength. Betrayal, hurt, and abandonment can all strike at the core of who we are. But if we persevere, if we stand firm in the face of the storm, we discover that resilience has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. This is the true essence of the human spirit, that no matter how dark things get, there is always a way forward, always an opportunity to rebuild what was lost. At the heart of this story is more than just a broken marriage. Yes, the emotional devastation of a partner's betrayal can leave us feeling lost and alone, but it's the journey that follows, the journey to rediscover who we are, to reclaim our own sense of worth and purpose that defines us. It's a process of reclaiming what's rightfully ours, not just love, but also forgiveness. This man's journey was not just about finding healing for himself, but about finding redemption and a path to reconciliation with the people he cared about most, his children. While Sarah lost everything she had once cherished, it was the strength and resilience of the father that allowed him to rebuild his relationship with his children. Despite the pain of the years he had lost, despite the anger and confusion that clouded the early years of their separation, he was able to show up, to step forward with courage, and to prove that the love of a parent can never truly be severed. His decision to leave without a trace wasn't one made out of spite. It was one born from a place of deep self-respect, a recognition that sometimes walking away from toxicity is the only way to preserve our own integrity. For years, this man suffered in silence, keeping his pain to himself, hiding away from the world that had once been his. But in the end, his strength shone through. It wasn't about revenge or making someone feel the hurt he had felt. It was about finding peace, about choosing to rebuild rather than remain broken. The father who had once been left in despair by his wife's betrayal became the symbol of resilience for his sons, who years later would come to him for guidance, for understanding, and for the love they had long been deprived of. The emotional complexity of this story is undeniable. It's a narrative that explores the depths of human vulnerability, the price of forgiveness, and the profound power of healing. It teaches us that even in the most trying of circumstances, we can find our way back to happiness, to peace, and to the people who matter most. The father's journey wasn't just about overcoming a broken marriage. It was about rediscovering his own worth, restoring his dignity, and ultimately finding redemption in the eyes of his children. The real victory here is not in what was lost, but in what was regained. A broken relationship with his children was repaired not through grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but through quiet strength, perseverance, and the ability to love unconditionally. It was in showing his children, through his actions, that forgiveness was possible, that healing was possible, and that even after years of pain, a family could find its way back together. This story is a reminder to all of us that no matter the obstacles we face, no matter the betrayals we suffer, there is always the possibility of redemption. There is always a way to heal, a way to rebuild. It's not about forgetting the past or erasing the pain, but about accepting it, learning from it, and using it to build a better future. For this man, that future included reconciling with the children he loved, showing them that love could endure even the deepest of wounds. If this story has touched your heart, if it has resonated with you in any way, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on more deeply emotional and meaningful videos. These stories are not just tales of pain and loss. They are reminders of the human capacity for growth, healing, and transformation. Every week, we share new, inspiring stories that offer a glimpse into the most intimate and profound experiences of life. By subscribing, you ensure that you'll never miss out on the stories that might help you navigate your own challenges, find inspiration in your own struggles, and ultimately live a life that is full of purpose and meaning. Take a moment to hit that like button if you believe this story deserves to be shared with others. Share it with your friends, your family, anyone who needs a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, there is always hope. The world can often seem dark, but it's in sharing our stories that we can bring light to others. By sharing, you help spread the message that no matter what life throws our way, we can always find a way forward, a way to heal, and a way to grow. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell. By doing so, you'll be the first to know when new videos drop. You'll never miss a chance to witness powerful stories that offer insight into life, love, pain, and the triumph of the human spirit. Whether you're seeking advice, inspiration, or simply a story that speaks to your heart, subscribing and turning on notifications ensures you stay connected with a community that understands and supports your journey. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this story and for allowing us to share it with you. We hope that it has brought you some peace, some perspective, or perhaps even the motivation to take that next step in your own life. We'll see you in the next video with more stories that continue to inspire, challenge, and touch the hearts of all who watch.